So for today's session, again, we are going to be taking a deeper dive into some of these more advanced features with a primary focus on things like route optimization and your customer communications. So after today's session, the goal is to make sure that you have the tools to get more deliveries done more efficiently and with a really high quality experience for your customers. Okay. So by way of introduction, I am Alyssa Monquist. Nice to meet you. And I am the onboarding success manager here at OnFleet. So what that means is that I'm hyper-focused on really the first 90 days of our customer journey. I work really closely with our customer success, our support, and our engineering teams to help organizations like yourself execute a successful delivery program. So you might see that setting up OnFleet can be really simple, but I'm here to share some of those best practices to make sure that you're really gaining the most out of using OnFleet. So today's agenda, a little bit more broken down. We're going to touch on some of the add-on features that you might want to consider turning on for your organization. I want to take a deeper dive into route optimization as well as auto assignment, both kind of OnFleet's smart assignment options. And then I want to dive into our customer communications options, and we'll wrap up things talking about our tracking page. So let's get into the dashboard here. Let me just switch windows. Here we go. So want to take a look at a couple of the add-on features that you will find on the add-ons tab of your organization here. So it's important to note that these available features are going to be based on the pricing plan that you have for your organization. So if you see an upgrade required kind of right over here where the toggle switch should be, you'll need to first upgrade in order to access that particular feature. But just want to highlight a couple today. So first, link tasks. Link tasks are a set of tasks that have a dependency structure to them, and they must be completed by probably one driver sequentially. So the best example that I can throw at you would be like in restaurant delivery, a pickup task that is associated with a drop-off task, and they are dependent on each other. So if your operations require more than one stop to fulfill an order, or if you need to enforce a task as a prerequisite to another, link task might be for you. Also worth noting that there is no limit to the number of tasks that you can create, and you can set up automatic SMS notifications that can be triggered by this dependency structure. So we'll get into that in a moment, but I just want to point out link tasks in the add-on tabs. Next up is route optimization. So route optimization is really an automated route planning engine. And this is super ideal for organizations that utilize a scheduled delivery model. Route optimization also considers a number of constraints and considerations when building out these routes, all of which can be configured in OnFleet, and we'll go over those momentarily. Next up is OnFleet Chat. So this is our internal chat platform that allows communication between all of your people in your operations. So this could be dispatcher to dispatcher, this could be dispatcher to driver, so on and so forth. You can even create group messages. Really convenient, allows communication in your organization without dispatchers having to leave the dashboard and without your drivers having to leave the mobile app. Okay. Next, we have predictive ETA. So this allows you to see estimated times of arrival and completion for all of your on-duty drivers and any optimized routes. So it's really, really helpful. We utilize historical data and machine learning to provide your operations teams, and sometimes even your customers, if you choose to turn this on, with these accurate arrival predictions. Super helpful. Next up, we have some proof of delivery options, so barcode scanning as well as ID scanning and age verification. So both of these can be used by organizations as a method for proof of delivery. Admins can also specify whether these proof of delivery options are required or just simply optional. Okay, so those are the major add-ons that I wanted to share with you today. So now that I've shown you where we can enable these, I want to take a deeper dive into route optimization first up. So there are some setup things that we need to take care of, required setup, and then I'll show you some optional setup. So let's start with our required setup. So we need to set up our teams and our hubs. So teams are a way of grouping your people operations. So this could represent any sort of organizational unit you want. Many people choose to use this as a way to differentiate a market or a geographic area. Some other operational or labor unit could be used too. So sometimes folks like to organize their teams by their contract workers versus their employees. But drivers can live on more than one team at a time. So definitely feel free to get creative with how you decide to organize this. So hubs will represent the physical location that maybe your team is assigned to. So this could be like a distribution center, a restaurant location, a warehouse. But again, hubs can be assigned to one or more teams. However, teams can only be assigned to one hub at a time, okay? So when we're running route optimization, we do have the choice to operationally have routes start and end at a hub. So something to consider when we get to actually running an optimization. So setting up your teams and your hubs is considered required setup. Now let's jump into some of the optional setup. So let's talk about some task details as well as some driver constraints that we can set up. So task details, let's jump in here. And something that I want to note too is when we're entering in task details like task quantity and service time, those are the two that we're going over. Both of these can be set programmatically via the API, or if you're using an import sheet, you can drop these in. For today's purposes, I'm just going to show you how to edit these details manually, kind of one by one, but just know that this is not necessarily manual, a one-by-one operation. You can do this in the import sheet or via the API. So task quantity, down here, you'll see task quantity and service time. Let me just scroll so you can see that a little bit better. So task quantity is going to be used together with a driver capacity to ensure that the routes that are created are really created to fit the constraints of a driver's vehicle. So whatever sort of unit you decide to use, maybe it's a parcel, maybe it's a box, maybe it's a bag, whatever you choose to use for the task quantity unit must also match up with the driver capacity unit. Okay, so we'll get there momentarily, but we're talking about task right now. So the service time will really reflect the amount of time that a driver is expected to spend at a task destination. So let's think of the situation that maybe a furniture setup or some sort of consultation is required. Maybe a driver is spending like 5 minutes on site. So you'll want to add that in as a service time. Okay? So those are the task details that are optional setup. Now let's get into the driver details that are also considered optional, but really help with the route optimization engine. Okay, so let's get out of here. We're going to navigate to our driver portal and get into a driver and talk about some of those details. So I mentioned driver capacity to be used in tandem with task quantity. Okay, so here is our capacity right here. And you can enter in the capacity, again, just matching up those units that you're using for the task quantity. And the other driver constraint is a driver schedule, which can be found down here, this little schedule button down here. So again, keep in mind, driver schedules can also be set and updated via the API. So your company doesn't have to, do this one by one in a manual way. And if you use a scheduling system, you may want those to come in automatically. Just know that you can. I'm just showing you the manual way for today. So you're choosing to set up your schedule here. Maybe there's a split schedule. You're allowing time for lunch in the middle or a break or something like this. Also know that you can set a default schedule for these drivers. So the default schedule will be accessible when you are running an optimization. So I'll make sure to highlight that when we get to that point, which is right now. Now let's actually get into running a route optimization to show you what that looks like. Okay, so I'm going to get out of here. I'm also going to set my filters for tomorrow, make sure that they're set for tomorrow because I'm going to be running this optimization for the future, okay? So you can run the optimization from either the map sidebar, your tasks. You can also do this from the table. So I definitely want to point that out. Again, the table is a great way to be able to take care of these bulk actions by selecting your tasks over here on the right and then choosing a bulk action like to optimize. For today's purposes, I'm just going to jump back to the map and show you how we are going to run this from the map. So I'm going to choose all of these unassigned tasks from the sidebar in a range here. So I'll select them all. And then I'm going to right click. Whoops, sometimes that doesn't work. I'm going to right click and choose to optimize these 23 tasks. Okay, so now we get into the meat of this optimization that I'm going to walk you through. So first, we're going to choose a date to optimize. So we're doing this in the future for tomorrow. By default, your current dashboard filter date will be used. So you notice that I changed the filter before we even got to this point. Please note, though, that if your routes do cross a day boundary, the date shown will be the first day in the route, okay? Next, you're going to want to make sure or confirm that your time zone is set correctly. So this is going to default to the dispatcher's current time zone. Dispatchers can edit the time zone for the route optimization here. So if their personal, settings aren't correct and aren't in the right time zone, just make sure that you're confirming that this is all right here. Okay, so next up, we're going to select one or more of our drivers that we want to consider for this particular route optimization. I'm just going to select all these drivers from this team HQ here. You can select up to 100 drivers at one time to be considered in this route planning. And just note that if drivers have individual schedules, they're going to be used and considered in the routing solution. If individual schedules have not been defined, again, here's where we can actually access the default schedule. So if you ever want to disable this or edit it or correct it, just know that you're going to be accessing it through an actual route optimization. So kind of like you're going through the process of running this, this is where you're going to access the default schedule. Okay, so next let's talk about some of these global settings here. So we have our max task drivers, maximum tasks per drivers, as well as our global service time. So you're setting the upper limit to the number of tasks that will be assigned to each driver. And the global service time is going to add the time a driver is expected to spend on site at whatever the pickup or delivery location is. And one thing to call out here, if you do have any per task service times, the global service time will be overridden during route calculation, okay? So this is kind of like the default, but if there's any sort of exceptions to the rule, make sure that you're setting that on a per task basis, either in your import sheet via the API or manually like I showed you earlier. Okay, so next we are going to define how we want to have the start and end points of our route. So the following options are going to be available here. So we can start from anywhere, the Teams hub, the driver's address. We can also start from like different hubs. Same thing true for our endpoints. These are our options, okay? So where we are starting and ending these particular routes from. I'm going to choose Teams Hub for both of these options. Last but certainly not least, we are choosing our optimization mode. So let me just share a little bit of context around all these options. So if we were to choose always arrive on time, our routes are going to be created and they're going to be strictly adhering to any task delivery windows that we have set up. So you might recall that when you're creating tasks, either the API via an import sheet or manually, that you can set up a time window. And these are represented by a complete before and a complete after time, representing the window, okay? So this will strictly adhere to that time window. We also have the option to balance our drive time and arrival time. So these will just be balancing these two options. And finally, if we want to minimize the overall drive time, so these routes will be created which minimize the total number of miles driven by your workers. So overall, this might reduce the overall cost to complete the route. However, please just note that it might allow some violations in your time window. So I am going to balance driving time and arrival time for this particular route optimization. So once I have everything the way I like it, I simply click to proceed and we are ready to dispatch. Great. So we have 23 tasks across 4 different drivers. Let's see what kind of routes get created here. So we're going to create routes. We are going to assign these tasks automatically to our drivers from this point. And again, depending on how large of an optimization this is, this could take a little bit of time. So it looks like out of this summary, we have 3 different drivers that have amassed a certain amount of tasks each, and their routes have been created. Once I click done, then those tasks will get assigned to those drivers. I have no longer any unassigned tasks. However, I do see lots of tasks assigned to these 3 drivers. Okay, so that was route optimization. Just switching gears a little bit now, I'm gonna go back to today's date and see if we have a bunch of unassigned tasks hanging out for us there. And we do. So let me just close some of these things so we can really get a good look. So we have these 6 unassigned tasks for today. So now I just want to switch gears a little bit and show you some features that are really ideal for the on-demand and ASAP kind of delivery model. So I'm going to show you auto-assigned. But before I do, I just want to point out that I do have a couple linked tasks over here. So I just want to point out visually kind of what they look like. So you'll see that there's a little dot to the right of this task as well as an arrow. So I just want to point out the arrow means that this is a pickup task. The dot to the right of this task indicates that there is a dependency that comes after. You guessed it, the dot before this pin over here represents that there is a task that needs to be completed before this task. So exactly what you thought. We got 2 pickups over here, Bonzi and Patrick, and then we have 2 drop-offs that are associated with those 2 pickups, okay? So those are what linked tasks look like in the dashboard. Okay, so let's get to auto-assign. So I'm going to take all of these unassigned tasks and I am going to attempt to auto-assign these. So let's just right-click. We're not going to choose to optimize, but simply auto-assign just below. And again, this can happen, you know, not only just on the map dashboard, but this can also happen in table view. I've shown you in the map. Okay, so our auto-assign options here, so we can choose to assign these to the closest driver. So this will auto-assign the tasks to the driver who is currently the shortest distance from the new task destination. Or we have this other option, so the shortest route. So this will auto-assign the tasks to the driver who, upon assignment of the new task, will have the shortest total distance to travel. So this takes into consideration any sort of task that this driver might have in their queue, all the way through to when they finish the task in their queue and when they would get assigned the new tasks. So a little kind of challenging to wrap your mind around that, but hopefully that makes sense. It calculates the distance from the active worker's last known location all the way through their queue and factors in the newly created task, okay? Next, we have some optional sort of advanced options that we can set here. And this is basically just setting an upper limit to the number of tasks that a driver can have at one time. And this option down here to ignore linked tasks, you probably don't want to ignore the linked tasks. You want to keep them together to be fulfilled and executed by the same driver. So I'm going to choose the closest driver, and I'm going to go ahead and assign these. And those tasks will probably get assigned to this driver. And there you see the route that is created for this driver. It's looking a little chaotic all over the city here, ping-ponging back and forth. But those tasks have just been appended to this driver on the tail end of their route. Okay, so auto-assign grabs those tasks, adds them to the driver's queue at the end of their route if they already have tasks assigned to them before the auto-assign. Okay, makes sense? Awesome. Okay, so I've shown you how to utilize OnFleet's smart assignment options for both kind of delivery models, the scheduled delivery model utilizing route optimization and the on-demand delivery model, which utilizes auto assignment. Okay, so let's just switch gears again. I'm going to show you some of our customer communications options. So one of the really key reasons we find people choose and adopt OnFleet is the ability to really better communicate updates to their customers, so to your customers, and the ability to connect these drivers and recipients much easier, okay? So we provide a lot of ways to do this, and we will make it super easy to set up. So I just want to start by showing you these automatic text message notifications that you can send to your customers. So over here in the communications tab is where we're gonna go. Okay, so yeah, these are our automatic SMS notifications. So really easy to create a new message. You can create a new message just by clicking over here. You can also edit an existing message that you already have. So to keep things easy, let's just go ahead and create a new message. I'll show you what happens next. So next we have the option to choose the trigger. So what is actually going to trigger this message automatically to fire off to the customer? Well, it's driver behaviors. So we have task started. So if the active task gets started, let's send this message. We have task completed. We have driver arriving, which, as you can tell, is sort of a spatial geofence. It is 50 meters. So we take when the driver is 50 meters away from the destination. That's the trigger. We have ETA, which is a really interesting one because we can even get really specific about what the ETA is. So we have these different options. You know, ETA is 30 minutes out, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, so on and so forth. So that's a great one. So once the ETA drops below this threshold, that's when the message fires off. We also have a message that can send to your customers anytime a delivery fails. So for whatever reason, maybe the delivery doesn't get there, maybe the person isn't there to receive it. If the task fails, we can fire off a message to the customer. And then we have these other ones, dependency started, dependency completed. So that's referring to those linked tasks, those tasks that are in a dependent structure. And finally, the predicted ETA. Very similar to actual ETA, we have very different thresholds that sort of go further into the future that allow you to set this message. Okay, so these are your triggers. Next, you need to decide what kind of task you are setting this message for. So perhaps this is just for a drop-off task. Let's change this to task started, just for drop-off tasks. And now we can actually create the message. So we simply start typing, and anytime we want to insert a tag, we can choose it from here. So if we want to get really personal and customize this by entering then the recipient name, we can do that. And we can let them know, you know, hey, recipient name, your driver, who is, and then enter in, you know, maybe the driver name if you want this, is on the way. Whoops, as I'm typing, is on the way. Really a great option here that I really definitely want to point out is the tracking link. Track your driver using this link, and then enter in the tracking link. So we'll get to that in a minute, how to kind of customize this tracking page, but super awesome. Definitely recommend using it in your customer communications. So let's just create that notification there. Oh, that's okay. So I'm just gonna, because we already have a task started message. So I'm gonna do a predicted ETA is 4 hours. There we go. So let's create that notification. It's here. And we have all these other messages as well. So moving on, you'll want to definitely make sure that your notifications are in your preferred language. We do have the option there to change that. These other options. So do you want to route your calls and messages to? So let's choose the routing behavior for these calls and messages, whether to route calls coming from the recipient directly to the driver, or if we want to have this set up to route to the admin. In any event, whatever you choose, we always recommend that you anonymize these communications. So anonymization protects the privacy of both parties, your drivers and your customers, so they won't actually see each other's phone numbers. So yeah, that's great. Anonymization, great to do. Switching gears again, want to show you, how you are sending these automatic notifications to your recipients. Next, I showed you how to add in that tracking link into those messages. So now let's jump into the tracking page and some of the customizations that we can take care of there. So over on the left-hand side, tracking page. From here, we show you a preview of what it looks like right this moment. So if we ever want to change this, we can simply customize and then choose our options to customize here. So you can choose a color from the dropdown. So simply, red, yellow, green, blue, purple, or you can choose to customize this using a custom HTML color, which I have populated here. Next, we can choose to send the organization logo. You'll see it just populated down here. So this is what your customers are receiving when they click on that tracking link. So if you want to add the driver photo, for example, or perhaps you don't want any photo at all good, you can set that there. Next, you are setting the details, so the details that you are providing in this information. So if you need to, enter in the transportation, the driver name, destination, address, or you can disable some of these options if it doesn't, make sense. Maybe we don't care if it's a car versus a walker. We don't necessarily need our driver name, but let's keep our destination address. Finally, you are setting up your communication preferences. So here we have the option to, in this case, we have calls and messages routed to the driver. So anytime the recipient, wants to call or message their driver, they can do so. If we don't want to allow those options, maybe we just want to allow them to message their driver, we can remove that. Now they just have the option to message. Finally, I want to point out the feedback link. So this is really nice for collecting feedback from your customers. It is a rating of 1 to 5 stars that your customer can set. They can also enter in a little message kind of describing their experience. The great thing about this is everything gets retained for you. You can always pull up this information and find it, after the task has been completed. You'll have a record of this feedback setting. Okay, well, that was a lot of me just talking. Hopefully that made sense to everyone. Just to kind of summarize what we went through today. We went through a lot of things. We introduced some of our add-on features that you can find in the org settings. We took a deep dive into sort of the required setup and the optional setup for route optimization. We ran an optimization. We then sort of switched gears into the on-demand delivery model and showed you auto assignment, and we wrapped up things really kind of diving into the customer communication. So hopefully everyone learned something new today. In the last couple of minutes, I want to open it up for questions. If you have any questions,